I've worked in the emergency room for over a decade. I've seen lives begin and end, witnessed miracles and tragedies unfold before my eyes. But that night, that stormy night, etched itself into my memory in a way I'll never forget. Outside, the storm howled like a beast finally freed from its chains. Wind screamed through the cracks, and rain hammered the hospital windows, like the sky itself was breaking apart. Thunder shook the building. Lightning split the darkness, illuminating the cold, sterile halls. Inside, we were overwhelmed, car crash victims, children seizing from high fevers, elderly patients gasping for breath. Just another chaotic night in the until something extraordinary happened. The automatic doors suddenly slid open. A blast of icy wind swept through the room, sending shivers down our spines. But it wasn't the cold that stunned us into silence. It was what stepped through those doors. A German shepherd, soaked to the bone, caked in mud, limped into the At first, I thought I was seeing things. A dog? In the middle of this chaos? Someone from security must have slipped up. But then, in the very next heartbeat, the room fell utterly still. Dangling from the dog's mouth was a soaked, trembling bundle of cloth. A nurse whispered, barely audible, "Is that a baby?" I stepped forward, heart pounding so hard I thought it might break my ribs. And yes, it was. A newborn, tiny, freezing, but breathing. The dog, injured, limping, pressed on, determined. It gently placed the baby on the cold floor, then lifted its gaze to mine. That look, I'd never seen anything like it. It wasn't just a plea for help. It was trust, pure, desperate trust. That we would save this child. That it had brought the baby to the one place it might still have a chance. No one needed to say a word. We moved instantly. A nurse wrapped the baby in dry towels. A doctor checked for vitals. And me, I knelt down beside the dog, laid my hand on its soaked head. It was panting, eyes half closed, rainwater and maybe tears slipping from its fur. That night, a dog fought through a storm to deliver a miracle. And a doctor long hardened by the unexpected, learned something new. That love, whether it comes on 2 legs or 4, can still make this world a better place. That was when the dog's legs gave out. The German shepherd collapsed onto the floor, its body curling in from sheer exhaustion. I snapped out of my trance, heart racing, and rushed to its side. "Call the NICU, now," I shouted, my voice nearly breaking through the sound of rain and machines. A nurse swiftly lifted the baby, her hands trembling but firm. Another checked for vital signs. The infant, so small, skin pale and icy, breath barely there, but alive, still alive. Meanwhile, the dog lay motionless on the cold hospital floor. His fur was soaked, smeared with blood and mud. His breathing was ragged, desperate, like he was fighting for every last bit of air left in his lungs. Blood oozed from a deep gash in his hind leg, proof that he had battled through something brutal. He had fought, he had bled, he had braved the storm, all to save that baby. A hospital security guard rushed in, eyes sharp and alert, but I raised my hand. Firm. "Wait," I said, "he's not a threat, he just saved a life." For a split second, the entire room stood still. Then, like a switch had been flipped, everyone sprang back into action. The nurses moved swiftly, silently. The baby was rushed to the neonatal unit. And me? I knelt beside the dog. I didn't know where he came from, or why he did what he did. But when I laid my hand on his soaking fur, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This dog was a hero. And somehow, I knew his story wasn't over yet. The baby was now in the hands of specialists, fighting to bring him back from the edge. But my heart, it stayed behind. Right there in that hallway, beside the dog still clinging to life. Another nurse knelt next to me, gently pressing her hand to his chest, feeling for breath. "He's alive," she whispered, "but barely. Call the vet team, now," I said, "and someone, check his ID tag." A young intern leaned in, carefully turning over the worn leather collar around the dog's neck. She squinted, then froze. Her eyes went wide, lips parting in silent disbelief. I met her gaze, shocked. "Pale. Doctor," she whispered, "he's not just any dog. I leaned closer, heart pounding, and then I saw it. Half hidden beneath his muddy, rain-soaked fur, a scratched, weathered silver badge. AK-9 insignia, faded, but unmistakable, and engraved on it, just one name. Rex. My breath caught in my throat. Rex. A former K-9 officer. Once a legend in the police force. A true hero. He had saved lives, chased down criminals, put himself in danger countless times. Then one day, he vanished. After one final mission years ago, he was gone. No trace. No goodbye. No one knew where he had gone. Until tonight. Until this storm. Until this moment, when he returned, between life and death, through wind and rain, to do what true heroes always do. Protect life, even if it cost him everything he had left. That name, Rex, pulled a thread deep in my memory. Unraveling old whispers I'd heard from injured officers in the over the years. They had spoken of a dog like no other. A silent legend. A tireless partner in the darkest, most dangerous missions. Rex was the finest search and rescue dog this city had ever seen. Trained for years, he had sniffed out missing people from beneath rubble, tracked suspects through back alleys and forests. Even saved his own handler during a drug raid that nearly turned fatal. But then, he disappeared. No signs, no leads, just stories left behind, and the aching silence of absence. Suddenly, a nurse burst into the room, face pale with emotion. The police are on their way, she said breathlessly. His handler, Officer Daniels, he's been searching for him since last fall. It had been nearly 7 months. I looked down at Rex. 1,000 questions raced through my mind. Where had he been all this time? And more importantly, how had he found a newborn? How did he know to bring the baby here, to us? We worked around the clock to stabilize him. His back leg was torn open, possibly by barbed wire or a blade. The blood loss was serious. But Rex didn't whimper. He didn't flinch. His eyes stayed open, alert, tracking every movement we made. Like he was still on duty. Like he was still guarding that baby with the last of his strength. The vet arrived just in time. IV fluids, antibiotics, dressings, X-rays. We did everything we could. Then, the door swung open. A tall man in a rain-soaked police uniform stormed into the room. As soon as he saw Rex, he stopped cold, frozen in place. A choked sound escaped from the man's throat. Barely a whisper, but thick with emotion. Rex. The dog's ears twitched. His weary head slowly lifted from the cold tile floor. His eyes met the man's. And for the first time since entering the hospital, his tail moved. Just a slight wag, but it was there. Officer Daniels dropped to his knees, as if the weight of the world had finally caught up with him. Oh God, buddy, I thought you were gone. He reached out, slowly, like one wrong move might make it all disappear. Like Rex was a dream that might vanish if touched too quickly. Rex gently pressed his nose into Daniel's palm. His eyes narrowed, not in pain, but in recognition, in peace. It was one of the most powerful reunions I'd ever witnessed. A man and the soul who never stopped fighting to find his way back. Daniel's voice cracked. Where have you been? How did you survive all this time? Then he turned to me, eyes wide with quiet desperation. Doctor, where did he come from? I shook my head, honest, still in awe. We don't know. He just showed up, carrying the baby, then collapsed. Daniels went pale. The baby? And just like that, reality snapped back into focus. The baby, that tiny, fragile life, the one Rex had carried through a storm, through pain, through blood and darkness. To deliver here, I had 100 questions. But one truth cut through them all like lightning. Rex hadn't just survived 7 months of disappearance. He was on a mission. A sacred one. A mission to save a life. And I needed to understand why. The room fell silent. No one dared to interrupt the moment. Because everyone there felt it. This wasn't just a story. This was something far greater. Daniels leaned down, his hand brushing through Rex's blood-matted fur. His face was pale with shock. But in his eyes, I saw something burning bright. Determination. Where had Rex found the baby? How did he know to bring her here? Who had left the child behind? And what had really happened during those 7 long months he'd been gone? We had already lived through a night of miracles. But what lay ahead might be even more extraordinary than the story so far. The NICU team was still fighting, relentless in their effort to keep the baby alive. But I couldn't wait any longer. Leaving Rex behind, I rushed down the cold hallway, my heart pounding in my chest, heading straight for the neonatal unit. The infant lay inside a temperature-controlled incubator. So small, so fragile, but still breathing. Her skin was cold and pale. Her heartbeat barely a whisper. But she was alive. Just then, a nurse came running, gripping a clipboard tightly. Her voice trembled. "Doctor, the police just got a 911 call." I frowned. "What kind of call?" She swallowed hard. "A woman, reporting that her newborn has been kidnapped." My whole body froze. I grabbed the clipboard from her hands, eyes scanning the frantic notes. A terrified mother had called in, saying someone broke into her home in the middle of the night. Took the baby straight from the crib. She woke up to an empty room. The front door, wide open. "Where does she live?" I asked, my voice tightening. "About 10 miles from here." The nurse replied softly, "Right near the edge of the forest." The forest. I turned, and locked eyes with Officer Daniels, who had just entered the room. His face turned pale. His jaw clenched. "That's the exact direction Rex came from," he said, and just like that, everything clicked into place. Somehow, Rex was there. Somehow, he had found that baby, and carried her through a raging storm, through thick forest and pitch-black night, to the only place that could save her. But what had happened before that? Police immediately dispatched an investigation team to the mother's home. Less than an hour later, reports came back. They had found muddy footprints leading away from the house, straight into the forest. But what they found at the end of that trail changed everything. Daniel's radio crackled. He listened, then stiffened, his face darkening. "They found a group of people," he said. I clenched my fists. "Who?" Daniels looked up. "A human trafficking ring." A chill surged down my spine. The officers had followed Rex's trail deep into the woods, to an old, rotting cabin hidden among the trees. Inside, the scene was horrifying. A baby crib, blankets, tiny clothes scattered across the floor, like someone had fled in a hurry. The men inside were armed. They carried burner phones, fake IDs, and enough evidence to prove the unthinkable. They were trafficking infants, and their next victim was the baby Rex had saved. Police moved in fast, arresting the entire group. But even as justice was served, one question hung in the air, heavy and unanswered. How did Rex know? How did a missing K9, gone for months, suddenly appear at exactly the right time, in exactly the right place, to rescue a child from the hands of evil? Daniel's radio buzzed again. This time, the voice on the other end was urgent. He froze, then looked up at me, eyes wide. "They just pulled the security footage." I held my breath. "Rex attacked them." The grainy video played. A man entered the cabin, carrying the baby. Others moved about, packing bags, preparing to disappear. And then, a shadow emerged from the tree line. Rex, alone, hungry, injured, but his eyes burned with purpose. No hesitation. He charged the cabin like a force of nature. Growling, lunging, teeth bared, he took down one man, locking his jaws onto the attacker's arm. Another pulled a knife, slashing deep into Rex's leg. Blood splattered, but Rex didn't stop. He grabbed the baby, gently, as if carrying life itself in his jaws, and ran, through the downpour, through the black forest, past roots and rocks and thorns. 10 miles, without stopping, without looking back, without ever giving up, until he reached the hospital, and collapsed at our feet. I covered my mouth, my heart tightened. This wasn't just a brave dog. This was a warrior, a protector, a hero no one expected, but exactly the one we needed. And because of him, a tiny life still had the chance to grow, to live, to be loved. Rex. That name would no longer be spoken in whispers. No longer a legend buried in memory. From this day forward, he would be remembered as a living legend. I turned back and looked through the recovery room window where Rex lay. His breathing was steadier now, slow but strong. His tired eyes blinked open, still scanning the room, alert, resilient, like he had never allowed himself to let go. Not even for a moment. He had fought with everything he had. And now, it was our turn to fight for him. That night, the hospital still buzzed with the usual sounds. Monitors beeping rhythmically, hurried footsteps echoing down the halls. Life being battled for behind every door. But this time, something else hung in the air. Hope. The baby had survived. The traffickers had been caught. And Rex, the bravest dog I had ever met, had completed a mission no one else could have. But it had come at a heavy price. He lay there, completely drained, IVs running, his leg tightly bandaged, chest rising with raspy, labored breaths. And yet, his spirit? Unbroken. Officer Daniels hadn't left his side for a second. He sat quietly beside Rex, his hand gently stroking the dog's tangled fur, tears still welling in his eyes. "I still can't believe it," he whispered, voice raw. 7 months. He was gone for 7 months. Then he looked at me. "And yet, he came back. And saved a life." I nodded, throat tight. "I don't know how he survived out there. But one thing I do know." Daniels looked up, waiting. I spoke softly, but firmly. "He was born to find that baby." Daniels swallowed hard. He leaned down, resting his hand on Rex's head. The dog stirred slightly. His tail moved, just a little. But it moved. Still Rex. Still here. Right then, a nurse walked in, holding a phone. "Doctor, the baby's mother, she's on the line. She'd like to speak with you." I took a deep breath and lifted the phone to my ear. "Hello?" Her voice trembled, fragile, cracking, but filled with an overwhelming joy. "Doctor, is my baby okay?" I smiled. "He's out of danger. He's going to be okay." A sob broke through the line. And then, after a pause, the question we had all been wondering from the start. Who saved my baby? I turned to look at Rex. He was still lying there, his gaze fixed on me, as if he already knew what I was about to say. I spoke softly. "A hero." The news spread like wildfire. Missing K9 reappears after 7 months to save kidnapped infant. Rex, the silent hero of the city. The dog who never gave up. Journalists flocked to the hospital. Letters poured in. Kids sent drawings, cards, dog toys, treats, anything they could to say thank you. Veterans called him a soldier. Police departments across the country reached out with words of honor. No one could ignore the story anymore. And then, 2 weeks later, the most unforgettable moment of all arrived. The mayor, the police chief, animal rescue organizations, they all gathered at the hospital to do something that had never been done before. Award Rex the highest honor given to a K9 officer. Officer Daniels stood proudly beside him. Rex, now fully recovered, sat tall, proud, calm as ever, as if everything that had happened was just part of the job. A gleaming gold medal was placed around his neck. Applause thundered through the room. Everyone stood. Cheers filled the air. Daniels knelt down beside him, gently wrapping his arms around the dog he thought he'd lost forever. "I thought I lost you," he whispered, voice shaking. "But you were never really gone. Were you? You were exactly where you needed to be." Rex licked his cheek, and this time, his tail wagged, strong, happy, proud. The crowd laughed, then clapped even louder. And then, the mother stepped forward. In her arms was her baby boy, healthy, smiling, a living miracle. She knelt before Rex, tears falling, but a smile glowing through them. I don't even know what to say," she whispered. "You brought my son back to me. You saved my whole world." Rex didn't need words. He gently rested his head on her knee. No applause needed, no medals, no speeches, because a true hero only needs to know they did the right thing. And a few weeks later, Rex made a full recovery. Veterinarians confirmed what we had feared. Because of the severe injury to his hind leg, Rex would never serve as a K9 again. But that didn't matter anymore. Because for the first time in his life, Rex had found something even greater than duty. He had found a place to call home. Officer Daniels officially adopted him. The day he walked Rex out of the hospital, I stood at the window and saw something I'd rarely witnessed in all my years as a doctor. Absolute peace on the face of a man who had weathered countless storms. They had once been partners, side by side in the line of fire, separated by silence, by time, by things left unsaid. But now, they were together again. No orders, no leash, no duties to perform, only love, and the quiet gratitude between two souls who never stopped believing in each other. Blank. Blank. As for Rex, he could finally rest. No more nights chasing through dark woods. No more growls on battlegrounds. No more fighting for life in the heart of a storm. Just a warm bed beside the fire. A home filled with laughter. the smell of home-cooked meals, and a gentle hand to rub his head after a long nap. A lost partner, now family. Forever. And a household that would love him until the very end. And somewhere out there, in another home filled with joy and light, a little boy will grow up. He'll carry this story with him, woven into the pages of his life like a legend passed down from heart to heart. He'll hear it told hundreds of times. Thousands. That once, a hero saved his life. A hero who wore no cape, asked for no glory, spoke no words, just a pair of loyal eyes, a brave, beating heart, and 4 bloodied paws that never stopped running. A dog named Rex, the hero who never gave up, and never will be forgotten. If Rex's story, the dog who never gave up, touched your heart, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Let's keep sharing powerful, emotional, and inspiring stories like this every week. Because the world needs more courage, more compassion, and more unsung heroes. Rex did his part. Now it's your turn. Just one click. Subscribe. And thank you so much for being here.